Hello, this is Kristina Cordero from Biblioteca, Escolar, Futuro and Facultad de Letras, talking to Natalia Kucirkova from the University of Stavanger in Norway about children, small children and technology. So we have had a great talk today, and we have a few questions that we want to ask you so that we can share it with a wider public.
Yep.
The first question is, I wonder if you might talk a bit about this kind of generalized panic that people seem to have about technology and, you know, the things that we see in the press that tend to scare people, especially parents, about children and the use of technology, and how we might double click onto that topic and go into a bit more nuance.
Yes. Well, it is often the case that negative news generate more interest and more clicks on headlines. So I think we need to be aware of that, and it's part of the moral panic we are seeing around technologies. But there are certainly some studies that show some correlations between young children's screen time and specific developmental outcomes. The issue with many of these studies that look at screen time versus developmental outcomes, or the association between the two, is that the correlation is often small or very small to have a consequence on the child's behavior. So although there is a relationship, if we looked at other aspects, there would be a relationship as well. So we need to be careful about making sweeping judgments and seeing technology as the culprit of all the negative effects we are seeing in today's society almost, right? But what I would say about the more nuanced approach, it's very helpful to think about technology in terms of the 3 C's. So it's important to think about the context of interaction. It's important to think about the content, what we are accessing on the device, about individual children who have different preferences, different skills, different ways of engaging with the technology. And then the connection among all these different aspects will help us understand what is the added value of technology.
Well, thinking about that, you spoke today about some of the added value for children that in the English-speaking world we call toddlers, who might be from 3 to 5-year-olds. And I thought it might be nice if you could speak about that. You know, maybe first talk about the smallest children from age 0 to 2, and then 4 to 6 years old, 3 to 6.
Well, I do have background in developmental psychology, so I do think a lot in terms of different age groups and milestones. But that is, my professional background. Not everyone thinks that way. But the research that we are seeing in my area is that for children under the age of 2, the added value of technology is just not there. It's such a sensitive period of development for young children that requires a lot of face-to-face interaction that simply cannot be replaced with technology, or at least not with the technology we currently have. It's not designed well enough for this very young age group. So I wouldn't recommend the use of screens for under the age of 2. That doesn't mean that if a parent decides to do a quick Skype call with the grandmother and the baby is part of the picture, that that's going to do any harm to the child's brain. That's not the case. It's just to make sure that we don't use smartphones as babysitters, or, instead of a book, you give your child a smartphone. I wouldn't recommend that. So for the older children, we can see a lot of opportunities in terms of enriching children's learning. So you see the possibility of expanding children's horizons in terms of the content that they access for reading different digital books, for example, in terms of children's creativity and the possibility to make their own content. And I mentioned also the notion of bridging different environments, so formal and informal learning, home and school, connecting children's personal interests to collective interests. Those are the beneficial aspects of technology that teachers can nurture, that parents can nurture, and that young children are engaging with already.
That's great. I think there's one last question that I'm sure many people who have clicked onto this video would be interested in knowing from you. You know, we talked about criteria And I know that you say that you don't like to have sort of a bullet point list of things, like a checklist of things that you should look for in an application. But what might you say to people who are curious to know how to evaluate the different types of apps, for reading literacy that they see? What would be your advice to them?
Okay, so it depends on the child's age. It depends on the purpose of the activity. There are differences if we want to look at apps for play or apps for literacy, apps for mathematics, science learning. So there are quite a few differences. But I think, generally speaking, I would say that some of the best practice guidelines we have for any resources for young children apply to the digital sphere as well. What we need to consider in addition is, of course, the things that come with the connectivity of the device. So we need to be careful about personal data use and whether that is not misused for commercialization purposes, for marketization purposes. We need to be careful about content that hasn't been verified by any authority, any experts. Nowadays young children can very easily download or access content that just isn't suitable for them. So all the things around internet safety are important. We talked a little bit about interactivity today. So interactive features that are very distracting or that encourage this kind of closed-ended game design, where you don't necessarily expand the child's thinking and it's not creative, that is not helpful. We have a very good list of these criteria online, so people who are interested in knowing the specifics might be keen to see the specifics we recommend for example, digital books, how you can use the zoom feature for illustrations, for example, or how to use highlighting feature for different words. So we can be very specific in terms of the guidelines, or we can have this broad criteria that are more, I would say, parent-friendly, so that anyone can engage with them.
Like rules of thumb. So
exactly, yeah.
And where would they go to look for this? Do you have a couple of names of institutions that you think people might want to click onto?
Yeah, although I'm anxious to say that because I only know the Anglo-American ones. So I don't know whether there's a Chilean organization which does that. It would be great if they did. I'm familiar with the US Common Sense Media, Children's Technology Review. In the UK we have National Literacy Trust. So there are dedicated national organizations that provide very good guidelines. And then for the specifics and digital books, we have a website, Digilit EY, that has a list of criteria for digital books.
Well, thank you very much. I think we could probably put them somewhere. So thank you very much, Natalia, for being with us.